Hello and welcome to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. If you'd like to become a patron of the podcast, we would love you to. And you can do so at patreon.com/the History Network. Thanks to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, Season 38, Episode 7. The Battles of Hedgeley Moor and Hexham, 1464. This episode was written by Murray Darm. Murray is an ancient and medieval military historian from New Zealand living in Australia. He has written more than 100 articles on various aspects of ancient and medieval military history, as well as other historical topics from all periods, ranging from the history of opera to the runic alphabet and recipients of the Victoria Cross. He is the author of Macedonian Phalangite versus Persian Warrior, Athenian Hoplite versus Spartan Hoplite, and Leuctra 371 BC, all from Osprey Publishing. He is, of course, a regular writer on here and a regular on the Ancient Warfare podcast. A combination of two battles fought close together in Northumberland in April and May 1464 brought Lancastrian resistance to the Yorkist King Edward IV to an end during the Wars of the Roses until 1469. These battles are of extreme importance, but are confused in the primary sources and often elided in modern accounts into a single battle, the last one fought at Hexham on May the 15th, although the date of the battle is also unclear. One of the reasons for this confusion is that the battles were fought close together, within a very short space of time, only 3 weeks apart. There are, however, sound reasons to explore each battle in turn. The last battle, that of Hexham, was indeed the most decisive encounter, but the consequences of Hedgeley Moor, fought on April 25th, are often combined with the final and more decisive Battle of Hexham, and which saw the total defeat of Lancastrian forces. The battle was also followed by a series of executions of prominent Lancastrians, which have often taken focus away from the battles. When his father, Richard, Duke of York, was killed at the Battle of Wakefield in December 1460, Edward inherited the Yorkist claim to the throne during the Wars of the Roses, which had initially broken out in 1455. Edward then won successive victories at the battles of Mortimer's Cross in February 1461 and Towton in March 1461, which saw him depose Henry VI and take the throne as Edward IV. After the Battle of Towton in 1461, the defeated Lancastrians retreated to their northern castles at Alnwick, Bamber and Dunstable. These castles were, however, surrendered to Edward in December 1462, after briefly being besieged. Henry and his wife Margaret of Anjou based themselves in Scotland and led an invasion of Northumberland in 1463, where they took back the 3 castles. The governors, Lancastrians who had sworn oaths of loyalty to Edward, were suspected of surrendering or handing over their castles to Margaret too easily. What is more, they then reneged on their oaths to Edward and once again turned Lancastrian. However, in the same period, the Lancastrians also failed to prevent the Yorkists from concluding a peace with Scotland, which was achieved in 1463, and escorting the Scots peace delegation to York in April 1464 played its part in the battles under discussion. With peace with Scotland imminent, the Lancastrian northern power base was now under threat, and it was decided to mount a new campaign in the north and to concentrate Lancastrian support before Edward IV, distracted in Leicester and York, could muster his forces and move to confront the Lancastrians. Edward was also still at war with France, although a truce had been arranged which would take effect on October the 1st, 1464. The Lancastrian army was commanded by 28-year-old Henry Beaufort, 3rd Duke of Somerset. At 19 he had fought at the Battle of St Albans in 1455, where his father had been killed. He is sometimes named as 3rd Duke of Somerset. After surrendering to the Yorkists in December 1462 at Bamber Castle, Duke Henry had been taken to London and feted by King Edward. He was pardoned in March 1463. He had been attainted by Parliament in November 1461, but was held in some kind of confinement at Holt Castle in North Wales. He escaped from Wales in December 1463 or early 1464 and immediately moved to rejoin the Lancastrians. He headed straight towards Newcastle, although he never reached it. His men, who had comprised the garrison, had been replaced by Yorkists. As the hope of the Lancastrians, however, his arrival in the north, even his approach, seems to have inspired a new aggressive policy from them. Although King Henry faced several financial woes, and his supporters would readily change sides if they could negotiate a deal with Edward, the commoners of Lancashire and Cheshire rose in support of the Lancastrian cause in March 1464. They were, however, soon suppressed. The commons of Northumberland, Durham, Cumberland and Westmoreland too remained Lancastrian in their sympathies. Edward never attempted to levy troops from those counties as he did from others. Duke Henry moved through Northumberland in March and April 1464, gathering support from Lancastrian garrisons. They took Norham Castle in Northumberland and Skipton Castle in Yorkshire. Norham was soon retaken by the Yorkists. In addition to Alnwick, Bamber and Dunstanburgh, the Lancastrians also had control of Hexham Tower and the castles of Tynewell, Prudo, Bywell and Langley. Somerset was nearly captured at Durham and may have headed to Alnwick Castle, where King Henry may have been holding court. Another source claims the Lancastrian king was at Bamber. Alternatively, Somerset may have headed towards another Lancaster stronghold, of which there were several. We have a series of contemporary and later sources for the battles of Hedgeley Moor and Hexham, but confusion soon began as to how many battles there actually were. The Warkworth's Chronicle, written by John Warkworth, who died in 1500, and which traced the first 13 years of Henry IV's reign, so 1461 to 1483, does not name the battle at all. It does briefly discuss Henry, the 3rd Duke of Somerset, and brother of Edmund, 4th Duke of Somerset, quote, that was slain at Hexham Feld, unquote. Gregory's Chronicle, an anonymous chronicle assigned to William Gregory, who died in 1467, despite the fact it traces history as far as 1470, only gives a brief account of the battles too. The executions of prominent Lancastrians which followed the battle gain a much fuller account. The chronicler William of Worcester wrote an account in his chronicle, although, frustratingly, the page containing the battle is lost. His manuscript resumes mid-battle. Jean de Warren's chronicle places the Battle of Hexham in 1463, and later writers even place it in 1462. Some historians therefore thought there was a battle fought at Hexham in 1462 or 63, and then another in 1464. The Yearbook de Termino Pachae of Edward IV, however, names the battle and gives its date, May the 15th, 1464. This and the 16th century sources provide a better description of the battle site than the earlier sources, which are sometimes confused. Other dates in May are sometimes repeated too. Some say May the 4th. In 1896, Barrett thought the battle was fought on May the 8th, following some earlier opinion. The date of the yearbook should be preferred. Alarmed by the Lancastrian resurgence, but distracted by other priorities, such as concluding peace with both Scotland and France, Edward appointed the 33-year-old John Neville, later to be first Marquess of Montague, to command a Yorkist force. He would command the Yorkist forces at both Hedgeley Moor and Hexham, and would decisively defeat the Lancastrians twice within a month. He led only a small force of men, however, perhaps only 3,000 to 4,000 men, all the Yorkists could raise in so short a time. Edward, no doubt, would head north as soon as he could muster more troops, although in the final analysis they would not be needed. Parliament had met at York on February the 20th, but was prorogued until May 5th. Edward was therefore tied up in York until then. Neville advanced to Durham on his way to Newcastle, and then further north to meet with the Scots peace delegation at Norham Castle, so to escort them to York. This is another factor in the first battle fought at Hedgeley Moor. The Lancastrians would attempt to block Neville's progress to meet the Scots peace delegation. If that peace could be derailed, the Lancastrian cause and its Scottish support could perhaps be revived. Wherever Somerset was, at Alnwick or Bamber, he was soon joined by Sir Ralph Percy and Sir Humphrey Neville with their troops, intent on stopping the Yorkist force under John Neville, which had been dispatched to the north to escort the peace delegation of the Scottish King James III to York. If successful, that peace would rob the Lancastrians of their Scottish base, which they had mainly used since Towton. Somerset had only a small Lancastrian force, however, quote, 80 spears and bows too, unquote, according to Gregory's Chronicle. He laid an ambush for Neville close to Newcastle, but the plan had been betrayed, and John Neville avoided it. Somerset therefore headed back to Alnwick Castle, where he received reinforcements from Lord Hungerford, the governor of Alnwick, swelling his forces to 5,000 men. Hungerford had been sent to France in July 1463, but must have returned soon after. This number is from Gregory's Chronicle, although, given Neville's modest Yorkist force outnumbered the Lancastrians soon after at Hedgeley Moor, it may be too large. Somerset may have had at most 3,000 men. The site for the Battle of Hedgeley Moor is given by Barrett, 1896, as south of Wooler, close to modern Wupperton, 7 miles or 11 kilometres to the south. Others state it was fought north of Glanton, 10 miles, 16 kilometres south of Wooler, or Powburn, 1 mile, 1.6 kilometres closer. This would place the battle between only 10 to 12 miles, 16 to 19 kilometres from Alnwick Castle. Another suggested site for the battle is close to so-called Percy Leap, near Beanley, 5 miles or 8 kilometres east of Wupperton and around 19 miles south of Wooler. The battle was associated with Percy's Cross, not the other monument known as Percy's Cross, 1 kilometre or 0.6 miles north-west of Otterburn, erected to commemorate the 1388 Battle of Otterburn, also known as the Battle of Chevy Chase, in which Henry Percy, 1st Earl of Northumberland's son, fought. The Percy's Cross, north of Powburn, was associated with Sir Ralph Percy, governor of both Banbury and Dunstanburgh castles, who died at Hedgeley Moor commanding a division of the Lancastrian forces. He had surrendered to Edward in December 1462 and was pardoned and given control of the castles. In 1464 he forswore his oaths to Edward and joined the Lancastrian cause with Somerset. Regardless of where precisely the battle was fought, this was a very dangerous place for a Yorkist force to be operating so close to the Lancastrian power base, but it was necessitated by needing to get to Norham Castle to meet the Scots peace delegation. In our sources we have 3 competing stories of the command of the Lancastrian forces at Hedgeley Moor. One claims that they were commanded by Lord Robert Hungerford, 3rd Baron Hungerford, alone, another that they were commanded by Hungerford and Lord Thomas Ross, 9th Baron Ross, and a third that they were commanded by Ralph Percy. These commanders were, however, under the overall command of the Duke of Somerset, and probably refer to the command of the 3 battles of the Lancastrian army. The Lancastrian force mustered, blocking the road north, the Devil's Causeway, the modern A1, which follows the line of the Roman road. They thus blocked the progress of John Neville north to the Norham Castle, located on the Tweed, on the border between Scotland and England, to meet the Scots peace delegation. As Neville proceeded north, he met the assembled Lancastrian forces with his own. Despite our sources giving us very little detail, the subsequent battle was, however, very brief. Although we are not given the strength of either force, at Hedgeley Moor the Lancastrians appear to have been outnumbered, and at the first Yorkist charge the divisions of Hungerford and Ross fled the field, leaving only that of 39-year-old Percy to fight on. Percy did indeed fight on, and he attempted to break clear, partially succeeding. The site of Percy's leap was apparently where his horse jumped in his attempt to escape the battle. Walter Scott measured the distance between the 2 stones as 18 feet, or 5.5 metres, in 1827, recorded in his journal for that year. After the leap, Percy was unhorsed, wounded, and then fell and was killed, possibly at the site of Percy's Cross. His monument displayed both the badge of the Percys and that of Lucy's, from Maud de Lucy, mother of Henry Hotspur Percy, Ralph Percy's grandfather. After victory at Hedgeley Moor, fought so close to the Lancastrian-held castles of Alnwick, Dunstable and Bamburgh, Neville continued north to Norham, where he met the Scots delegation and escorted them south again to York. Barrett was confused as to why it took John Neville 3 weeks to march the only 40 miles between Hedgeley Moor and Hexham, but he ignores the need to escort the Scots peace delegation to York. It may be for this reason that he dates the battle to May the 8th. Once the delegation was safely delivered to York, Neville returned to Newcastle and then headed towards Hexham on May 14th. Gregory's Chronicle. Barrett talks, 1896, of news that King Henry was waiting there with the Duke of Somerset, and to where he and some of the remnants of the Lancastrian forces at Hedgeley Moor had retired, including Hungerford and Ross. It is unlikely that King Henry was with the Lancastrian forces, however. He had not been at Hedgeley Moor, probably kept safe since he had already been captured in battle 3 times. Likewise, we have evidence of him at Bywell Castle just prior to the Battle of Hexham, and it seems unlikely that he was at that battle either. After the battle, his helmet was recovered from Bywell, something he is unlikely to have forgotten if he was heading to the battlefield. Despite several claims in the sources that Henry was at the battle, no contemporary sources states that he was. Only the 16th century chroniclers do, Hall and Grafton specifically. More likely he was kept safe so that he could escape if the need arose, which it did, and he did successfully escape the Yorkists for a time. Another tradition, Stowe, Annales 418, is that Henry had fled from Neville's advance 4 days before the battle towards the west, which makes more sense of his helmet being discovered, although this is the only source to mention it, and it was also a late 16th century source. Gregory's Chronicle, however, states that Henry fled to Scotland, although with the peace negotiations at York he would have been in danger of capture had he fled there. It was no longer a safe refuge. Eventually Henry would be captured near Clitheroe in Lancashire, to where Stowe states he fled, in July 1464 by Sir Thomas Talbot. Next time we will continue this episode by looking at the final showdown in Hexham in 1464. Thanks once again, Murray, for writing that episode for us. If you'd like to have a go at writing an episode for us, or you want to contact us and give us an idea for a subject that you think we've not covered yet, then just drop us a line info@thehistorynetwork.org for that. And once again, please do consider becoming a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/thehistorynetwork. Once again, thank you to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. Thanks again for listening. You've been listening to the historynetwork.org podcast, written by Murray Darm, read by Nick Barker.